126 rooms, 58 bedrooms, 33 bathrooms, 17 acres of oceanfront paradise. The sun beating down on pristine beach as the Atlantic Ocean stretching endlessly toward the horizon and rising from 17 acres of virgin beachfront property as structures so magnificent, so impossibly opulent that it would redefine American luxury forever. This is Mar-a-Lago. The name means sea to lake, and that's exactly what it is. A palace is stretching from the Atlantic Ocean to Lake Worth, embodying the dreams of one woman who refused to accept that American architecture couldn't rival the great estates of Europe. 128 rooms, 58 bedrooms, 33 bathrooms, 12 fireplaces, 3 bomb shelters, an in-hole golf course, and a shoreline that stretches farther than most people's entire property. The estimated value today sits conservatively at $300 million. But let's be honest, this is a property that transcends conventional valuation. This is history frozen in Mediterranean, limestone, and Dorian stone. This is the story of ambition, wealth, vision, and the relentless pursuit of perfection. But to understand how this American palace came to be, we first have to understand the woman who willed it into existence. Marjorie Merriweather. Post wasn't just wealthy, she was Gilded Age royalty born into the posthumous cereal fortune, a company her father C.W. Post built from nothing into an empire that would eventually become General Foods Corporation. When her father died in 1914, Marjorie inherited not just wealth but responsibility. She inherited vision. She was 27 years old, and she was the richest man in America. Most people would have been content to simply spend that fortune. Marjorie wanted to build something eternal, something that would stand as a testament to American achievement. American craftsmanship, American ambition. She had seen the great estates of Europe, the palaces of Spain, the villas of Italy, the chateaux of France, and she asked herself a question that would consume the next 7 years of her life. Why can't we build something like this in America? No to copy, mind you, but something uniquely American, something that the best of European design and filtered it through the lens of American optimism. American scale, American possibility. In 1920, she and her then-husband Edward Hutton began acquiring land in Palm Beach, 17 acres of pristine oceanfront property that stretched from the Atlantic to Lake Worth, creating that magical connection that would give the estate its name, Sea to Lake Mar-a-Lago. The vision was audacious: build a winter retreat that would serve as both a private residence and a monument to American craftsmanship, a place where the most powerful people in the world could gather, where history could be made, where the future could be shaped. And Marjorie had the means to make it happen. Let's be honest about what Marjorie was attempting. This wasn't just building a house. This was creating a statement. This was declaring that American architecture, American design, American craftsmanship could stand alongside anything Europe had produced in centuries of refinement. Think about that for a moment: the audacity, the sheer ambition. Europe had a 1,000-year head start, palaces built by kings' estates, refined over generations, architecture traditions passed down through centuries. And here was Marjorie Merriweather Post saying we can do better. She didn't want to copy European grandeur, she wanted to transcend it. He wanted to take Spanish design, Moorish influences, Italian proportions, Portuguese tile, sand, create something that had never existed before: a Mediterranean palace on American soil, built with American money, designed by American architects, constructed by American craftsmen, using materials sourced from around the entire world. The project would take 7 years. It would require the coordination of dozens of craftsmen. It would push the boundaries of what was architecturally possible in 1920s America, and it would cost there approximately $7 million in 1920s money. Do the math on inflation, that's roughly $140 million today for a winter home, a seasonal residence. Think about that. But Marjorie wasn't thinking about cost, she was thinking about legacy. Now we need to talk about Edward Francis Hutton, because while Marjorie provided the vision and the fortune, Edward provided something equally important: business acumen, political connections, and an understanding of how power actually works in America. Edward Hutton was a Wall Street titan, co-founder of E.F. Hutton and Company, a man who understood that wealth wasn't just about money, it was about influence, access, power. He had connections that stretched from Wall Street to Washington, from industrial magnates to political kingmakers, and he understood what Marjorie was really building. This wasn't just a winter home. This was a power center, a place where deals could be made, where political futures could be shaped, where the direction of American commerce and politics could be influenced over dinner in a dining room that rivaled anything in Washington, D.C. Edward brought his own vision to Mar-a-Lago: practicality, security, infrastructure. While Marjorie dreamed of beauty, Edward thought about functionality. The estate needed to be fortified, hence the bomb shelters built into the structure itself. It needed to be self-sufficient, hence the massive service wings, the industrial kitchens, the power generation facilities. It needed to project power, hence the imposing scale, the strategic location, the architectural grandeur that announced to anyone approaching, this is where important people gather together. Marjorie and Edward created something that neither could have achieved alone, a palace that was simultaneously a work of art and a statement of power. Now I want to hear from you. What do you think drove Marjorie to build something this ambitious? Was it pure ego? Was it a genuine desire to prove American architectural capability? Was it about securing her place in history? Or was it something deeper, a need to create beauty in a world that often seemed focused only on profit? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And while you're there, hit that subscribe button because we're just getting started on this journey through Mar-a-Lago. The search for the perfect location took Marjorie nearly 2 years because she understood something fundamental about great estates. Location isn't just about beautiful views or prestigious addresses. It's about possibility. It's about the land itself telling you what it wants to become. She looked at properties throughout Florida. She considered locations in Newport, Rhode Island, where the Vanderbilts had built their monuments. She even explored sites in California, where the climate rivaled anything the Mediterranean could offer. But Palm Beach called to her. There was something about this barrier as land, this thin strip of land between the Atlantic Ocean and Lake Worth, that captured her imagination. Perhaps it was the quality of light, the way the sun seemed to make everything glow with an almost supernatural radiance. Perhaps it was the tropical vegetation, the royal palms and bougainvillea that created a sense of exotic authorness. Perhaps it was simply that Palm Beach was becoming the winter destination for America's elite. And Marjorie understood the importance of being where power congregated. In 1923, she found its 17 acres of undeveloped beachfront property that stretched from ocean to lake, the only parcel in Palm Beach that offered this unique geographic feature, a property that was literally sea to Lake Mar-a-Lago. The land itself was magnificent. Pristine Atlantic beaches gave way to natural dunes beyond just stretched acres of untouched subtropical landscape ending at the calm waters of Lake Worth. The property had 2 waterfronts, 2 completely different characters, oceanside awe and majesty, lakeside awe, serenity and reflection. But it wasn't just about beauty. Marjorie understood strategy. This location meant Mar-a-Lago would be impossible to replicate. Another estate claimed to bridge both bodies of water. Neither property could offer this geographic uniqueness. It meant their estate would always be singular, always one of one, always beyond comparison. The land acquisition itself was complex. Multiple parcels had to be assembled. Property lines had to be drawn. Easements had to be secured. Access rights had to be negotiated. Edward Hutton handled much of this, his Wall Street experience proving invaluable in the intricate negotiations required to assemble the complete 17-acre parcel. The cost was substantial even by Gilded Age's standards, but Marjorie didn't hesitate. She knew she had found the canvas upon which her masterpiece would be painted. The property was officially secured in 1924, and immediately, Marjorie began the next phase, assembling the team that would transform her vision into a reality. For the architect, Marjorie needed someone who understood both classical European proportions and the practical realities of building in subtropical Florida. Someone who could translate her vision of Mediterranean grandeur into a structure that could withstand hurricanes, humidity, salt air, and the intense Florida sun. She found her architect in Marion Sims Wyeth. Now Wyeth was already established in Palm Beach. He had designed several significant estates in the area, and he understood the unique challenges of building luxury residences in Florida's climate. But more importantly, he understood proportion. He understood how to create space that felt simultaneously intimate and grand. He understood the importance of light and airflow in tropical architecture. When Marjorie first met with Wyeth, she arrived with portfolios, hundreds of photographs she had personally taken during her European travels, images. Spanish courtyards, Moorish archways, Italian loggias, Portuguese tilework, French ironworks. He had documented every detail that captivated her, every architectural element she wanted to incorporate. She spread these photographs across Wyeth's desk, and she said something that would define the entire project. I want all of this, but I want it to feel like it belongs here, like it grew naturally from this land. I don't want a copy, I want a creation. Wyeth understood. Has spent weeks studying the site, walking the property at different times of day, observing how the light changed, how the wind moved, how the landscape breathed. He understood that a successful design wouldn't impose itself on the land, it would emerge from it. He began sketching the layout with Spanish principles organized around courtyards that would provide natural ventilation and create intimate outdoor spaces within the larger estate. The orientation would maximize ocean breezes while providing protection from hurricane-force winds. The proportions would be grand but not overwhelming, impressive but not oppressive. But Wyeth couldn't do it alone. Marjorie assembled an international team of craftsmen and designers. Joseph Urban, the legendary set designer who had worked with the Ziegfeld Follies, would oversee interior decoration. His understanding of theatrical impact would prove essential in creating rooms that were both beautiful and dramatic. Franz Barwig, a Viennese sculptor, would create custom decorative elements. His understanding of classical forms would ensure that every detail met Marjorie's exacting standards. Tile setters would be brought from Portugal, specifically from the workshops that had produced tiles for centuries. They would bring their traditional techniques, their understanding of how color and pattern could transform surfaces into art. Stone carvers from Italy would be commissioned to create custom capital scorbels and decorative elements, each piece hand-carved to specifications, each element unique. Ironworkers who understood Spanish traditions would forge custom gates, rail, inns and decorative elements using techniques that hadn't changed in centuries. This wasn't just a construction project. This was an assembly of masters, each bringing centuries of tradition, each contributing their expertise to Marjorie's vision. The architectural style Marjorie chose wasn't arbitrary. It was deeply intentional. Spanish Moorish design represented something specific in her mind. It represented sophistication, exoticism, romance, but also permanence, strength, endurance. The Moorish had built structures in Spain had lasted centuries, structures that had weathered time and conflict, structures that still took people's breath away. That's what Marjorie wanted. She wanted Mar-a-Lago to feel ancient event, how it was being built news. She wanted it to feel like it had stories to tell. Event though those stories hadn't been lived. She wanted it to evoke the romance of Mediterranean culture. The refinement of Moorish design, the grandeur of Spanish colonial architecture. Wyeth began with the roofline because he understood that in Spanish architecture, the roof is statement, note afterthought. The specified thousands of antique Spanish tile styles that had been reclaimed from buildings in Spain that were being demolished, tiles that carried history in their very clay. These weren't reproduction tiles. Some were over 200 years old. Each one showed the patina of age, the weathering of time, the character that only genuine antiquity provides. The roofline would feature multiple levels, creating the complex silhouette characteristic of Spanish design, with towers rising at strategic points, providing vertical accents that would be visible from both ocean and lake. The exterior walls would be cladding Dorian stone, a honey-colored limestone that would glow in the Florida sun, creating that warm Mediterranean feeling Marjorie craved. But the stone wouldn't be smooth. It would be hand-chiseled by Italian craftsmen, creating texture and shadow, creating the sense that the building had been weathered by centuries of sun and wind. Windows would be carefully apportioned following Spanish traditions, smaller openings on the ocean side for protection, larger openings on the courtyard side for light and ventilation. Each window would feature custom ironwork grills, designed in the Spanish tradition, both decorative and functional. The entrance would be imposing, a massive archway flanked by towers, announcing to anyone approaching that this was an ordinary residence. This was a palace. The archway itself would be large enough to allow automobiles to pass through into the central courtyard, a feature borrowed dire. See tila from Spanish palaces, where carriages would enter into protected interior spaces. But the most striking element would be the tower. Marjorie insisted on a tower rising 75 feet above the estate, a vertical element that would be visible for miles both from the ocean and from Palm Beach proper. The tower would serve multiple purposes. It would house Marjorie's personal quarters, providing her with a private sanctuary above the estate. It would serve as an observation point, offering panoramic views. It would function as an architectural exclamation point, announcing Mar-a-Lago's presence to the world. The Spanish Moorish influence would be most evident in the decorative details, the use of azulejado tile work throughout, intricate geometric patterns that would adorn walls, floors, fountains, the incorporation of horseshoe arches, a distinctly Moorish element that would appear in doorways and loggia, the use of carved plasterwork, creating three-dimensional patterns on ceilings and walls. This wasn't mere decoration. This was cultural storytelling. Each element referenced centuries of Mediterranean and traditioniac detail, connected Mar-a-Lago to a lineage of great estates stretching back through history. If there's one thing that sets Mar-a-Lago apart from virtually every other estate built in America, it's this: the materials weren't just expensive, they were irreplaceable. They were sourced from around the entire world, each element chosen not just for beauty but for authenticity, for connection to the great architectural traditions. Marjorie's admired. Let's start with the tiles. Marjorie commissioned 36,000 tiles from Portugal. Not reproduction tiles, but custom-made tiles created by craftsmen using techniques that dated back centuries. These tiles would adorn floors, walls, fountains, creating surfaces that were simultaneously functional and artistic. Each tile was hand-painted, many featuring intricate patterns that required days of work to complete. The colors were traditional Mediterranean blues and yellows, predominating colors that would remain vibrant in the intense Florida sun colors that connected Mar-a-Lago visually to the great estates of Spain and Portugal. But the Portuguese tiles were just the beginning. From Spain came not just the antique roof tiles, but also hand-carved wooden ceilings. Entire rooms would feature Spanish-style coffered ceilings, each panel individually carved and painted designs that had been used in Spanish palaces for centuries. From Italy came marble tons of it, different varieties for different purposes. Carrara marble for sculptures and decorative elements, colored marbles for floors and walls, rare varieties that hadn't been quarried in decades, all sourced through connections Marjorie had cultivated during her European travels. The marble alone represented an investment of hundreds of thousands of dollars. But Marjorie wasn't concerned with costs. She was concerned with authenticity, with quality, with creating something that would justify the ambition of the project. From Austria came hand-carved wooden panels depicting scenes from European life. These panels would line the walls of certain rooms, creating an atmosphere of old-world sophistication. From England came antique furniture pieces that had histories of their own. Heirs that had seated nobility, tables where treaties might have been signed, desks where important correspondence had been written. Marjorie understood that a truly great estate required layers of history, and if that history had to be imported, she would import it. Their on-work throughout the estate would be custom-forged Spanish-style gates with intricate scrollwork railings that were simultaneously delicate and strong, decorative elements that added both security and beauty. Every piece handmade, every element unique. The landscaping materials were sourced globally. Palm trees were imported from various tropical regions. Specific varieties chosen for their aesthetic qualities, their growth patterns, their ability to create the lush tropical atmosphere. Marjorie envisioned the stonework alone required coordination with quarries in multiple countries, each type of stone chosen for specific properties, for color, for durability, for the way it would weather in Florida's climate, for the way it would photograph. Because Marjorie understood that Mar-a-Lago would be photographed extensively, and she wanted it to look perfect from every angle. The logistics of this global sourcing were staggering. Ships had to be chartered to transport materials across the Atlantic. Customs had to be navigated. Storage had to be arranged. Insurance had to be secured. Coordination between craftsmen speaking different languages, working in different time zones, had to be managed. Edward Hutton's business experience proved invaluable here. His understanding of international commerce, his connections in shipping, his ability to solve logistical problems that would have defeated lesser managers, but perhaps the most extraordinary element was the time capsule quality of the materials. Many of them represented the last examples of dying traditions. The Portuguese tile makers were among the last craftsmen practicing their particular technique. The Spanish carpenters creating the coffered ceilings were working from patterns that fewer and fewer artisans understood. The Italian marble quarries were producing varieties that would soon be exhausted. In sourcing the materials, Marjorie was creating something that could never be replicated, not just because of cost, but because the supply chains, the craftsmen, heavy sources no longer existed in many cases. Mar-a-Lago became a repository, a museum of materials, a testament to what could be achieved when vision met sources, when determination met expertise, when someone refused to accept impossible as an answer. Now I want you to think about this and drop your thoughts in the comments. Marjorie spent $7 million Depression-era dollars sourcing materials from around the world to build a seasonal residence. Was this the ultimate expression of artistic vision, or was it excessive consumption that exemplified everything problematic about Gilded Age wealth? And don't forget to subscribe, because we're about to step inside and explore the chambers where American power gathered. Imagine, if you will, arriving at Mar-a-Lago in the late 1920s. Your automobile, turning off South Ocean Boulevard, passing through towering gates, wrought iron masterpieces that announce immediately this is not a house, this is a statement. The approach is calculated, the tree. The driveway curves gently, allowing the estate to reveal itself, gradually building anticipation, building that sense of awe that Marjorie wanted every visitor to experience. And then you see it, the facade rising before you, honey-colored Dorian stone glowing in the Florida sun, antique Spanish tiles creating a roofline of extraordinary complexity, the tower rise. Nenji 75 feet above, creating a vertical accent that draws the eye upward toward the cloudless sky. This is architecture, a spower statement, asked the teacher. Your automobile passes through the main archway, large enough to accommodate the most substantial vehicles entering into the motor court, a space enclosed on 3 sides by the estate itself, creating an immediate sense of arrival, of having passed from the public world into a private realm. The motor court's paved with those Portuguese tiles, geometric patterns that seem to shimmer in the dappled sunlight that filters through the portico above you. Step out of your automobile, and the first thing that strikes you is the scale doorways, large enough for giant's columns that seem to support the sky itself, proportions that make even tall individuals feel diminished. This is intentional. Marjorie understood that great architecture should inspire a sense of awe, should make people feel that they're experiencing something beyond the ordinary, beyond the everyday. The entrance doors themselves are masterpieces, hand-carved Spanish cedar fitted with gusto, ironwork, each door weighing hundreds of pounds, yet balanced so perfectly they open with the gentlest push. And when those doors open, when you step inside, everything changes. The entrance hall is a symphony of materials, Spanish tiles underfoot creating patterns of extraordinary complexity, carved plaster ceilings overhead featuring medallions and geometric designs that draw from centuries of Moorish tradition, walls that seem to glow with that particular quality of light that only the finest limestone provides. But a most striking element is the spa. TL drama. The entrance hall opens into the central courtyard, but not directly. There are layers, reveals carefully choreographed views that draw you forward. Natural light floods in from above, from the courtyard beyond, creating that interplay of light and shadow that's characteristic of the best Mediterranean architecture. To your left, a glimpse into formal rooms. To your right, the suggestion of intimate spaces. Straight ahead, the courtyard beckoning, and everywhere details, custom light fixtures that are simultaneously functional and sculptural deco. Rative tiles set into walls at unexpected locations, creating moments of visual interest. Carved wooden screens allowing views while maintaining separation. Ironwork that's so intricate it seems impossible that human hands created it. This entrance hall serves multiple purposes. It's a decompression chamber, allowing visitors to transition from the public world outside to the private world within its assorting space. From here, guests can be directed to various parts of the estate, depending on the formality of the occasion. It's a statement announcing immediately that Mar-a-Lago operates on a different level, that expectations should be adjusted accordingly. The ceiling height is extraordinary, perhaps 18 feet, creating volume that allows the space to breathe, a natural ventilation drawing air from the courtyard beyond, keeping the space comfortable even in Florida's heat. And then there are the doorways, multiple doorways leading to different areas of the estate, each one framed with carved stone, each one featuring custom ironwork, each one offering a glimpse into spaces beyond. Marjorie understood that great houses don't reveal themselves all at once, they unfold gradually, each space leading to the next, each room offering new discoveries, new details to appreciate. The entrance hall includes seating areas where guests meet, wait niches where sculptures are displayed, every surface, every detail considered and reconsidered, designed and redesigned, until it achieved that particular quality of inevitability that marks great design. Standing in this entrance hall, you understand immediately that you've entered someplace special, someplace where normal rules don't apply, where beauty takes precedence, where craftsmanship is paramount, where someone cared enough to make every single detail perfect. From the entrance hall, we make our way through a series of interconnected passages, offering new visual experiences until we arrive at what might be the most important room in the entire estate. The dining pavilion. Now understand, this isn't just a dining room. This is where power congregated, where deals were struck, where marriages were arranged, where political alliances were formed, where the direction of American commerce was debated over courses prepared by French-trained chefs served on china that belonged to Europe and royalty. The dining pavilion is extraordinary. The proportions. First, the room measures approximately 30 feet by 40 feet with ceilings that soar to 20 feet, creating volume that allows for grandeur without oppression. The table itself could seat 40 guests. 40, think about that for a moment. Think about the logistics of serving 40 people simultaneously, maintaining proper service protocols, ensuring that conversation could flow naturally across that distance. The table was custom-made from rare woods inlaid with decorative patterns, each place a setting precisely measured, following the strict protocols of formal dining that still overlay high society in the 1920s and 30s. But the table is merely the functional center. The room itself is their statement. The floor is a masterpiece of Portuguese tilework, intricate geometric patterns in traditional Mediterranean colors, blues and golds, creating a surface that's simultaneously functional and artistic. Each hand-painted, many featuring unique elements that make the floor a kind of treasure hunt if you take the time to examine it closely. The walls feature a combination of materials, hand-painted wallpaper depth, depicting Mediterranean scenes alternating with panels of Spanish leather, panels of carved woods, sections of decorative tilework, creating a visual complexity that rewards extended viewing. The ceiling is perhaps the most extraordinary element. It's a Spanish-style coffered ceiling, each panel individually hand-carved in Spain, hand-shipped to Florida, and installed by craftsmen who understood the mathematical precision required to make such a ceiling work. Each panel features gilded details, gold leaf carefully applied to highlight the carved elements, creating a ceiling that seems to glow in candlelight. Because that's how Marjorie preferred this room, lit by candlelight, by the light, but light of an enormous custom chandelier that featured dozens of candles, supplemented by smaller walls. Consist also, fitted with candles. In candlelight, the room transformed. The gold leaf in the ceiling seemed to flicker and dance. The colors in the floor tiles deepened and intensified. The carved details cast complex shadows. The entire space became theatrical, almost magical. The windows are carefully placed and proportioned, large enough to allow natural light during daytime meals, but not so large as to compromise the room's intimacy. Custom ironwork grills provide security while allowing air circulation. The window treatments are sumptuous layers of silk and brocade, carefully chosen to complement the room's color palette, providing privacy when needed, allowing the room to be open to views when desired. At one end of the room stands an enormous fireplace in Florida, where temperatures rarely require heating. But a fireplace serves multiple purposes. It provides a visual anchor for the room. It creates a traditional focal point that formal dining rooms require. It allows for those cool winter evenings when a fire would be pleasant. The fireplaces surround us carved marble, a tour de force of sculptural detail, featuring claw, Sicilian motifs, Mediterranean imagery, custom details that connect to the overall design narrative. Thimentel displays rotation of objects depending on the season, depending on the occasion. Sometimes antique Spanish ceramics, sometimes Italian marble sculptures, sometimes French or Molo clocks. Every object carefully chosen, every element contributing to the overall effect. The dining pavilion includes service areas discreetly integrated, butlers' pantries where staff could stage courses, warming areas where food could be kept at proper temperature, storage for the elaborate china, silver, crystal required for formal service. Because serving 40 people wasn't a simple matter, it required choreography, multiple servers moving in coordination, perfect timing ensuring that each course arrived simultaneously at all 40 places settings. This room witnessed history. Presidents dinned here, ambassadors negotiated here, corporate titans made deals here, society marriages were celebrated here. This was where power looked like in 1930s America. Formal, elegant, governed by protocols that everyone understood. Now we ascend, making our way up the grand staircase, another architectural marvel featuring that same attention to detail that characterizes every element of Mar-a-Lago. Custom ironwork railings, Spanish tile risers, carved stone balusters. The staircase is wide enough for multiple people to ascend side by side. The risers are precisely calculated 2 inches shorter than standard, creating an elegant measured ascent that allows ladies in formal gowns to climb with grace and dignity. At these kun level, the character of the estate changes. The public grandeur gives way to private luxury. The scale becomes more intimate, though no less luxurious. The family quarters occupied the entire second floor, a series of interconnected rooms that allowed Marjorie, her daughters, and her husband private spaces away from the constant entertaining that defined Mar-a-Lago's social function. Marjorie's personal suite is extraordinary. It includes a bedroom, a sitting room, a dressing room, a bathroom, and access to the tower, each space designed specifically for her needs, her preferences, her vision of what private luxury should entail. The bedroom is surprisingly understated by Mar-a-Lago standards. The proportions are generous but not overwhelming. The decoration is refined, not excessive. Marjorie wanted her private spaces to be restful places of refuge from the grandeur of the public rooms. The color palette is soft pale blues and creams, creating a sense of serenity. The ceiling is hand-painted with delicate botanical motifs. The floor is covered with custom woven carpets and subtle patterns. The bed itself is extraordinary, an antique piece acquired from a European estate, hand-carved walnut featuring posts that rise almost to the ceiling, hung with silk curtains that could be drawn for privacy, creating a room within a room. The windows are strategically placed to capture ocean breezes, while providing privacy. Custom shutters allow completed darkness when desired, or can be opened to flood the room with that particular quality of floor. Morning light. The sitting room adjacent to the bedroom serves as Marjorie's private retreat, a place where she could read, correspond with friends and business associates, plan the elaborate entertainments that Mar-a-Lago became famous for. The room includes a desk custom-made from rare woods featuring secret compartments where valuable documents could be secured, comfortable seating areas where intimate conversations could occur, built-in bookshelves housing Marjorie's personal library. The decoration reflects Marjorie's personal taste. The more theatrical design of the public rooms. The dressing room is something else entirely. It's actually a series of rooms, one for storing day wear, another for evening gowns, a third for shoes and accessories. Because Marjorie's wardrobe was legendary, she owned hundreds of gowns, many custom-made by the finest couturiers in Paris and New York, each one requiring proper storage, proper care, proper maintenance. The closed feature custom cabinetry with individual compartments for each garment, lighting that allows proper inspection of colors and details, full-length mirrors, strategically placed seating areas where outfits could be assembled and considered. This isn't vanity. This is recognizing that in her social position appearance mattered, that clothing was a form of communication, that presenting oneself properly required infrastructure. The bathroom. We need to talk about the bathroom, because this is where Marjorie's attention to detail becomes almost obsessive. The bathroom features fixtures imported from Europe, marble from Italy, tile from Portugal, a bathtub carved from a single block of marble large enough to qualify as a small pool. The tube is positioned to capture ocean views. Imagine that, bathing in marble splendor while watching the Atlantic Ocean. The fixtures are gold-plated, not because Marjorie was ostentatious, but because gold doesn't tarnish, doesn't corrode, stands up to salt air better than other finishes. The mirrors are enormous, framed and carved in gilded wood, lit by custom sconces that provide flattering light. There are separate areas for different functions. A water closet in its own compartment, a bide in another, a shower with multiple heads. This bathroom is larger than most people's bedrooms. But a most extraordinary element of Marjorie's private quarters is the tower access. From her sitting room, a private staircase spirals upward into the tower, climbing 75 feet to Marjorie's personal sanctuary, her retreat from everything, a space that she alone controlled. But we need to return to the ground floor, because we haven't yet discussed the space that might be the most extraordinary room in the entire estate: the ballroom. The gold and white ballroom, where history quite literally danced, where the most important social events of the Palm Beach season occurred, where debutantes were presented, where political futures were shaped, where American high society gathered in Elit's carefully choreographed glory. The ballroom occupies its own wing of the estate, accessible from the main house, but also designed to function semi-independently, allowing large-scale entertaining without disrupting the private areas. The proportions are staggering. The room measures approximately 60 feet long by 40 feet wide, with ceilings that soar to over 20 feet. That's 2,400 square feet of ballroom in a private residence. The floor is extraordinary, blonde laid in intricate parquet patterns, each piece hand-fitted, creating a surface that's simultaneously beautiful and functional. Because a ballroom floor must be perfect, absolutely level, slightly flexible, to provide spring for dancers, finished to provide the right amount of traction. The Vanderbilts knew about ballroom floors, the Astors, all the G. Riet families of the Gilded Age. They understood that the floor was fundamental to a ballroom's success, and Marjorie was determined that Mar-a-Lago's ballroom would rival anything Newport or New York had to offer. The walls are a symphony of gold and white, carved plaster panels featuring classical motifs, gilded to catch and reflect candlelight, alternating with mirrors, strategically placed to multiply the space, to create the illusion of even greater grandeur, to allow guests to admire themselves and others from multiple angles. Because that's what balls were about, seeing and being seen. The ceiling is perhaps the most theatrical element in the entire estate. It's painted with clouds like the great room at the Breakers, but the clouds are more dramatic, more three-dimensional, featuring cherubs and classical figures, creating a scene that's simultaneously celestial and earthly. The ceiling is also coffered sections dropping down, creating architectural interest, creating surfaces for the application of gold leaf, creating that visual complexity that prevents such a large space from feeling empty or cold. The chandeliers, there are 3 of them. Each one enormous, custom-made, featuring hundreds of crystals, hand-cut and hand-assembled, creating fixtures that are simultaneously functional and sculptural. These fixtures would create a kind of magic, the crystals catching and multiplying the light, creating a shimmering, almost dreamlike quality. The ballroom includes a musician's gallery, an elevated space at one end where orchestras could perform levate. The music would carry properly positioned so the musicians could see, the dancers could adjust tempo to match the energy of the room. The gallery features its own architectural details, carved railings, decorative panels, creating a space that's simultaneously functional and beautiful. The windows in the ballroom are extraordinary, floor-to-ceiling French doors that can be opened completely, allowing the room to extend onto the adjacent terrace, effectively doubling the entertainment space, allowing ocean breeze to cool the room, allowing guests to move freely between interior and exterior spaces. The doors feature custom ironwork providing security without compromising aesthetics. They're balanced so perfectly that even a child could open them. This ballroom witnessed extraordinary events, charity balls that raised hundreds of thousands of dollars for worthy causes. Debutante presentations where young women from America's most prominent families were introduced to society. Political fundraisers where senators and congressmen mingled with industrial titans. Holiday celebrations that lasted until dawn. The state-hosted Supreme Court justices, members of the cabinet, foreign ambassadors, visiting dignitaries from around the world, all gathered in this room, all experiencing Marjorie's vision of what American luxury could be. Their room could accommodate up to 200 guests comfortably. 200 people dancing, dining, celebrating, all in this one room. The logistics were extraordinary. The catering required to feed 200 people. The staff needed to serve them properly. The coordination required to make everything flow smoothly. But Marjorie had their sources and the determination to make it work. She employed a full-time staff at Mar-a-Lago, even when she wasn't in residence, groundskeepers to maintain the 17-acre housekeepers to keep the 128 rooms pristine, specialized staff to care for the art and antique, security to protect it all. The ballroom includes adjacent service areas, staging areas where food could be prepared, where staff could coordinate, where the elaborate mechanics of large-scale entertaining could occur hidden from guest view. Because that was essential to Marjorie's vision, guests should experience magic. They shouldn't see the machinery that created it. Standing in this ballroom event today, when it's no longer used for its original purpose, you can almost hear the music, the orchestra playing waltzes and foxtrots. You can almost see the dancers spinning across that perfect floor, the ladies in their gowns, the gentlemen in white tie. You can almost feel the energy of those evenings when American power gathered, when history was made. This room represents something important. It represents a moment in American history when we believed that beauty mattered, that craftsmanship was worth pursuing, that creating memorable experiences required effort and resources and vision. Now I want to hear from you. We've walked through these chambers of power, from the grand entrance through the dining pavilion into the private quarters and finally into that legendary ballroom. What strikes you most? Is it the scale, the attention to detail, the sheer ambition, or is it something else? Drop your thoughts in the comments and make sure you're subscribed, because we're not done. Dense awaiting the story of how this palace transformed from private residence into something else entirely. But Mar-a-Lago isn't just about the architecture. As magnificent as the structure is, Marjorie understood that a truly great estate required integration between building and landscape, required gardens that were as carefully designed as the rooms, required outdoor spaces that extended and complemented the indoor experience. These 17 acres surrounding the main house became Marjorie's canvas for creating paradise. She hired landscape architects who understood tropical horticulture, who knew which plants would thrive in Florida's climate, which combinations of vegetation would create that lush, exotic atmosphere she envisioned. The approach from South Ocean Boulevard is carefully choreographed. The gates themselves are masterpieces, raw iron, featuring the Mar-a-Lago crest, custom designed to announce even before you enter that this property is something extraordinary. Beyond the gates, the driveway curves through what's essentially a tropical forest, royal palms, creating a canopy overhead, their trunks rising 30-40 feet before the fronds begin, creating that cathedral-like quality. Palms that were imported specifically for Mar-a-Lago, selected for their height, their symmetry, their ability to create vertical drama. Beneath the palms, layers of tropical vegetation, carefully selected and positioned to create a depth, to provide privacy, to offer continuous color throughout the year. Marjorie didn't want a garden that only looked good in one season. She wanted year-round beauty, year-round interest. She installed bougainvillea, those brilliant cascades of magenta and crimson and white that are so characteristic of Mediterranean landscapes, straining the mover arbors, allowing them to climb walls, creating explosions of color against the honey-colored stone. She planted hibiscus, dozens of different varieties, providing daily blooms in colors from pale yellow to deep red, their large flowers, creating focal points throughout the grounds. Bird of paradise with their exotic range in blue flowers that seem almost artificial in their perfection. Ginger, with its intoxicating fragrance, jasmine climbing and trailing, creating layers of scent. The gardens weren't just decorative, they were experiential. Marjorie wanted people to move through them, to discover new vistas, new combinations of plants, new experience at every turn. She created multiple garden rooms, each with its own character, its own purpose. A formal rose garden featuring varieties carefully selected to thrive in Florida's heat, traditional European garden design, adapted to subtropical conditions. Geometric bed sedge with boxwood, creating that sense of order and control that formal gardens require. Cutting garden where flowers could be harvested daily to fill the numerous vases throughout the house, providing fresh blooms for every room, ensuring that the estate always felt alive, vibrant. A kitchen garden where herbs and vegetables were grown, not because Marjorie needed to grow her own food, but because she appreciated the quality that comes from produce harvested minutes before being prepared. The ocean side of the property features different landscaping, more naturalistic, reflecting the wildness of the Atlantic beyond dunes, stabilized with native vegetation, sea grapes and palms, creating that transition zone between manicured estate and natural beach. Marjorie maintained a private beach, perhaps 300 feet of pristine Atlantic shoreline, a beach that was groomed daily, raked to perfection, any debris removed, maintaining that sense of pristine paradise. The lakeside presents yet another character. Here, the landscaping is more refined, more intimate, reflecting the calmer nature of Lake Worth, as opposed to the Atlantic. There's a wall protecting the property, but it's designed to be beautiful, not just functional decorative elements integrated into its construction, making it appear more like an architectural feature than mere infrastructure. Along the lake, Marjorie created walking paths, meandering through the tropical vegetation, offering different perspectives on the estate, allowing residents and guests to experience the property from multiple angles. She installed fountains throughout the grounds, not just decorative features but functional elements that provided the soothing sound of moving water that increased humidity in the immediate area, that created focal points and gathering spaces. One fountain in particular deserves mention. The courtyard fountain at the center of the main house is surrounded on four sides by the structure itself. This fountain is extraordinary Portuguese tile work featuring traditional azulejo patterns in brilliant blues and golds, water flowing from multiple levels, creating a complex symphony of sound. The design borrowed directly from Moorish traditions where water feature. Reesware central top Alice designed both practically and symbolically. The courtyard itself is perhaps Marjorie's greatest landscape achievement. It's an outdoor room as carefully designed as any interior space. The floor is entirely tiled, intricate patterns that would be at home in any great Spanish palace. Columns support covered walkways, allowing movement around the courtyard, protected from sun and rain. Planted areas feature tropical vegetation carefully selected for scale for fragrance, creating a garden within the architectural frame. This courtyard serves multiple purposes. It provides natural ventilation for the surrounding rooms. It creates a private outdoor space protected from public view. It offers a venue for entertainment that's neither fully interior nor fully exterior. Some of Mar-a-Lago's most memorable parties occurred in this courtyard, evening events lit by torches and lanterns, the fountain providing soundtrack, the tropical air scented with jasmine and ginger, guests moving between courtyard and adjacent rooms, blurring the line between inside and outside. Now we must climb up that private staircase from Marjorie's sitting room, spiraling upward through the tower, ascending toward Marjorie's ultimate retreat, the space she designed specifically for solitude, for contemplation, for escape. The staircase is narrow by design. This isn't a public space, this is personal. The walls along the staircase feature hand-painted tiles, Portuguese azulejos depicting scenes of pastoral life, creating visual interest during the climb, creating that sense of ascending through layers towards something special. The stairs are lit by small windows strategically placed, offering glimpses outward as you ascend, teasing the views that await at the top. And then you emerge into Marjorie's tower room. The space is octagonal, windows on all 8 sides providing 360-degree views of the estate, the ocean, Palm Beach beyond. The proportions are intimate, maybe 15 feet across, but the ceiling soars another 12 feet, creating vertical drama, creating that sense of being suspended between earth and sky. The windows are floor to ceiling, allowing unobstructed views. Custom iron-on work provides security without compromising sightlines. The glass is hand-blown, creating subtle distortions that give the views a slightly dreamlike quality. The floor is Spanish tile geometric patterns in muted colors. The ceiling is hand-painted clouds and sky, continuing the celestial theme that appears throughout Mar-a-Lago. The furnishing is minimal because this space is about the views, about the experience, not about decoration. A desk positioned to face east, allowing Marjorie to watch the sun rise over the Atlantic. A comfortable chair with a no-toman positioned to face west for sunset views over the lake. A small day bed, where she could rest, perhaps nap, certainly contemplate. Built-in bookshelves housing a carefully curated selection of books, poetry, philosophy works that Marjorie returned to repeatedly. This was Marjorie's thinking space. Here, escape from the obligations of wealth, from the constant entertaining, from the management of her business empire. Up here's 25 feet above the estate, she could breathe. She could think, she could plan. Many of her most important decisions were made in his room. Business decisions about the direction of General Foods. Personal decisions about relationships, family matters. Philanthropic decisions about which causes to support. She would climb to this tower room in the early morning, watching the sun rise over the Atlantic, the light gradually revealing the estate below the ground, submerging from darkness. She would climb here in the evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in impossible colors, the light fading, the estate below beginning to glow with interior light. This room was her sanctuary, her connection, and to something beyond the material, beyond the social, beyond the constant demands of her position. And here's something extraordinary. The tower was designed with acoustics in mind. When the windows are opened in a certain combination, the trade winds moving through create sound almost like music, a constant, gentle presence that Marjorie found deeply comforting. She would sometimes spend hours here, just listening, just being. You have to understand that Marjorie didn't just build a house. She created an entire world, a carefully orchestrated landscape where every tree, every flower, every pathway was positioned with the same attention to detail that governed the interior spaces. The landscape architect she chose was a man who understood that great gardens aren't accidents, they're compositions. His name has been lost to most histories, but his work speaks for itself. 17 acres transformed from raw Florida beachfront into a subtropical paradise that referenced Mediterranean estates while remaining distinctly appropriate to its setting. The overall landscape strategy was brilliant in its simplicity. Create distinct zones, each with its own character, its own purpose, its own aesthetic, while maintaining visual and experiential flow between them. The approach from South Ocean Boulevard we've mentioned, but let's truly understand what Marjorie achieved here. The property line is marked by that magnificent wall, Indiana limestone rising 8 feet, creating both security and privacy. But the wall isn't merely functional, it's architectural, featuring decorative elements, carved caps at regular intervals, custom ironwork inserts, allowing glimpses inward while maintaining separation. The gates themselves are extraordinary pieces of custom metalwork. The Mar-a-Lago crest prominently featured scrollwork that required months of forging by craftsmen who understood traditional Spanish techniques. Beyond the gates, the experience is carefully choreographed. You don't see the house immediately. Instead, you enter into what feels like a tropical forest. The driveway curving gently through vegetation so lush, so carefully layered that you lose all sense of being in a developed area. The canopy is created by Royal Palms Roystonia regia specimens that Marjorie had imported specifically for this purpose. Some of them already 40 feet tall when planted, creating instant maturity, instant drama. These palms aren't planted randomly, they're positioned to create rhythm as you drive, creating a colonnade effect. They're perfectly straight trunks, rising like columns, their fronds beginning only at heights above any vehicle, creating that cathedral ceiling quality. Beneath the palms, multiple layers of tropical vegetation. Cycads, those prehistoric plants that look like palms but predate them by millions of years. Their chunky trunks and stiff fronds creating bold, textural statements. Bird of paradise, Strelitzia reginae, with those extraordinary orange and blue flowers that seem almost artificial in their perfection, providing color at eye level. Ginger, various species chosen for both their dramatic foliage and their intoxicating fragrance, creating an olfactory experience as you approach. Bromeliads, hundreds of them tucked into every available space, their rosettes of leaves creating pops of color, their exotic forms adding to that sense of tropical abundance. The planting isn't just beautiful, it's strategic. The layering creates privacy. You cannot see into the property from the street, despite the fact that the wall is only 8 feet high. The curves in the driveway prevent straight sightlines, creating anticipation as each turn reveals new vistas. The choice of plants creates year-round interest. There's never a season when Mar-a-Lago looks dormant or bare. And then around a final curve, the house reveals itself. The approach is calculated to present the most dramatic view, the tower rising 75 feet, the honey-colored Dorian stone glowing in whatever light happens to be present. The complex roofline, with those antique Spanish tiles, creating a silhouette that's simultaneously foreign and familiar. The motor court where you arrive is itself a garden space. The paving is Portuguese tile geometric patterns in traditional blues and golds, creating a surface that's far too beautiful to simply drive on. Planted beds feature carefully selected specimens, hibiscus with their large dramatic flowers, oleander providing screening and fragrance, carefully pruned shrubs creating defined edges. But the motor court is just the beginning. The grounds extend in all directions, each area designed with specific purposes in mind. To the south, a series of formal gardens. These gardens reference European traditions. Parterre gardens with geometric beds edged in boxwood. The beds filled with seasonal flowers, changed multiple times per year to maintain continuous color. The formality here contrasts beautifully with the wild lushness of the entrance, creating variety, creating different experiences within the same property. Marjorie employed a full-time staff of groundskeepers even when she wasn't in residence. Their sole responsibility maintaining these gardens to perfection. The head gardener had his own cottage on the property, along with extensive greenhouses, where plants could be propagated, where seasonal flowers could be forced, where the constant supply of fresh blooms for the house's countless vases could be maintained. To the east, the landscape transitions toward the ocean, becoming more naturalistic. Here Marjorie worked with the existing dune ecosystem, rather than fighting it. She stabilized the dunes with native vegetation, sea grapes with their round, leathery leaves, coca plum providing berries for birds, saw palmetto, that quintessential Florida native, creating that windswept coastal character. But even in this naturalistic area, every plant was placed intentionally, every composition considered. The goal was to look natural, while actually being highly controlled. Pathways wind through this eastern landscape crushed shell, creating surfaces that are permeable, allowing water to soak through, preventing erosion. The paths wide enough for 2 people to walk comfortably side by side. Along these paths, Marjorie positioned seating areas strategically placed to capture particular views, benches and small pavilions where one could sit and contemplate the ocean. The interface between the house and the Atlantic Ocean is perhaps the most spectacular landscape achievement at Mar-a-Lago. This isn't simply a beach. This is a series of carefully designed terraces that mediate between the architecture and the natural coastline, creating spaces for entertainment, for relaxation, for experiencing the power and beauty of the ocean. The main terrace extends from the ballroom, 60 feet of paved outdoor space that effectively doubles the ballroom's capacity when the French doors are opened completely. The paving is extraordinary. Marjorie used the same Portuguese tiles here as throughout the interior, creating visual continuity, creating that sense that the terrace is simply an outdoor room. But she understood that tiles in Florida sun become hot, potentially uncomfortably. So she specified lighter colors, tiles that would reflect rather than absorb heat, making the terrace usable even in the middle of summer days. The terrace features multiple levels, subtle changes in elevation, creating distinct zones without requiring walls or barriers. The uppermost level, adjacent to the ballroom, is fully paved, designed for dancing, for dining, for formal entertainment. Tables and chairs could be arranged here for outdoor dinners. Orchestras could set up here for garden parties. One level down, a broader terrace more casual in character. Here Marjorie placed comfortable seating groupings, intimate conversation areas, positioned to capture ocean breezes while providing some protection from direct sun. Custom-made furniture designed specifically for these spaces. Wrought iron frames with cushions in weather-resistant fabrics, colors chosen to complement the house's overall palette. Between seating areas, Planters, large Portuguese ceramic vessels filled with tropical specimens, creating vertical interest, creating pockets of fragrance, creating that sense of lush abundance that characterizes the entire property. The terrace includes architectural elements that provide shade and definition. A pergola at one end, custom-designed ironwork supporting heavy timber beams. The beams in turn supporting flowering vines, bougainvillea jasmine, creating a living roof, creating dappled shade, creating perfume in the air. The pergola becomes a room, a defined space within the larger terrace where one feels simultaneously outdoors and protected. Beneath the pergola, Marjorie often hosted luncheons, the dappled light creating flattering illumination, the ocean visible beyond the vegetation, the sound of waves providing natural soundtrack. Along the terrace's outer edge, a low wall. This wall serves multiple purposes. It provides seating, it creates a psychological boundary between terrace and beach, it incorporates planters that cascade with tropical vines. But the wall doesn't block views. It's only 2 feet high, just enough to define without separating, to create boundary without barrier. Beyond the wall, a transition zone. Here the Portuguese tiles give way to coral stone, more casual, more appropriate to the beach setting, creating a buffer between the formal terrace and the natural beach. This area includes pathways to the beach, carved into the dune system, stairs where needed, always generous, always graceful. And then, the beach itself. 300 feet of private Atlantic coastline. Marjorie maintained this beach obsessively. Every morning before sunrise, staff would rake the entire beach, removing any seaweed, any debris, any footprints from the previous day. The goal was perfection, was that sense that you were the first person ever to walk this sand. Beach cabanas were positioned at strategic intervals, changing rooms where guests could transition from formal attire to beachwear, storage for beach equipment, for umbrellas, for the various accoutrements of seaside leisure. The cabanas themselves were architectural achievements. Not simple structures, but miniature buildings featuring the same attention to detail as the main house. Spanish tile roofs, carved wooden details, decorative ironwork. Even the beach furniture was custom designed. Chaise lounges with frames in powder-coated aluminum cushions in marine-grade fabrics, umbrellas that were works of art in themselves, wooden frames, hand-painted canvas, creating shade while remaining beautiful. The beach experience at Mar-a-Lago wasn't rustic, wasn't casual in the typical sense. It was refined luxury extended into the natural environment. Marjorie understood that her guests expected certain standards, expected service, expected beauty, expected that every detail would be considered. So even beach picnics became elaborate affairs. Staff would set up on the beach tables with linens, china, crystal, the full formal service, transported from the house, meals prepared by French-trained chefs, served by uniformed waiters. This was luxury that refused to compromise regardless of setting. Now, there's something interesting about Mar-a-Lago. Marjorie didn't initially include a swimming pool. She had the Atlantic Ocean, literally steps from the house. Why would she need a pool? But as the 1920s progressed into the 1930s, pools became expected features of luxury estates, symbols of modernity, of sophistication, and Marjorie never wanted Mar-a-Lago to seem dated, so in the early 1930s, she commissioned a pool. But this wouldn't be just any pool. This would be a statement. The pool was positioned west of the main house between the house and Lake Worth, taking advantage of that unique sea-to-lake geography. The location was strategic, placing the pool away from the formal oceanside terraces, creating a separate recreation zone, allowing different activities to occur simultaneously without interference. The pool itself is extraordinary, 75 feet long by 30 feet wide, for serious swimming, for water sports, for entertaining on a grand scale. The depth varies from 3 feet at one end to 9 feet at the other, accommodating different uses, different comfort levels. But it's the details that make this pool special. The interior is entirely tiled, not with standard pool tiles, but with custom Portuguese azulejas, blues and golds, creating intricate patterns on the pool floor, creating a surface that's simultaneously functional and artistic. When the pool is full of water, these tiles shimmering effect, the patterns seeming to move and dance with the water's movement. The pool deck is generous, probably 3,000 square feet of space surrounding the water. The paving continues the Portuguese tile-themed geometric patterns that complement but don't replicate the interior moat, ifs creating visual harmony while maintaining interest. Marjorie understood that a pool isn't just about swimming. It's about lounging, about gathering, about creating scenes. She positioned numerous chaise lounges around the pool, custom-made pieces featuring the same attention to detail as all the furniture throughout the estate. She created seating areas, clusters of chairs and tables, where people could gather for poolside meals, for afternoon cocktails, for those extended social interactions that defined Hira. She commissioned a pool house. This structure is significant in its own right. It's not a simple changing room, it's a full pavilion featuring changing rooms, showers, bathrooms, a serving kitchen, storage areas for pool equipment and furniture. The architecture mirrors the main house. Spanish-influenced tile roof, decorative details, carved wood and ironwork, creating a secondary building that's beautiful in its own right. The pool house includes covered areas, loggia spaces where one could sit in shade while still being part of the pools, scene where meals could be served, where the bar could be set up, or parties, because yes, Marjorie hosted elaborate pool parties. These weren't casual affairs, they were productions. The pool would be lit with underwater lights, creating magical evening atmospheres. Floating candles would be released, creating constellations of light drifting on the water surface. Musicians would perform in the pool house pavilion. Elaborate buffets would be set up. Themed decorations would transform the space, and beyond the pool house, the property extends to Lake Worth. Here Marjorie created a dock, a substantial structure extending into the lake capable of accommodating large boats, providing access for arriving guests who came by water. The dock area features its own landscaping, its own seating areas, its own architectural elements, creating another distinct zone within the property. A boathouse was constructed partially on the dock, partially on land, housing water sports equipment, small boats, kayaks, everything needed for lake recreation. The Lake Worth side of the property has a completely different character than the ocean side, where the Atlantis is all power and majesty. The lake is intimate, peaceful. Marjorie understood these different characters and designed accordingly. Lakeside seating areas are more intimate, more contemplative, positioned for sunrise viewing, for quiet morning coffee, for the different kind of beauty that calm water provides. But we must return to the tower because we haven't fully explored its significance. The tower rises 75 feet above the estate, a vertical element that dominates the skyline, that announces Mar-a-Lago's presence. Several miles away, that serves as both practical space and symbolic statement. The decision to include a tower was debated. Marion Sims Wyeth, the architect, initially proposed a more horizontal design. Spanish estates didn't always feature prominent tower sheergued, but Marjorie insisted. She wanted that vertical element, wanted a space that was entirely her own, wanted a vantage point from which she could survey her kingdom. And she was right. The tower makes Mar-a-Lago. It transforms the house from impressive to iconic. It creates a focal point. It provides architectural drama the horizontal elements alone couldn't achieve. The tower's exterior is carefully detailed. The walls are the same Dorian stone as the main house, creating visual unity. The windows are carefully proportioned, tall and narrow, in the Spanish tradition, featuring custom ironwork grills. The roofline features decorative elements, carved stone, corbels, terracotta tiles, creating a crown that's visible from extraordinary distances. At night, the tower would be lit not garishly but subtly, light washing up the walls, making the structure seemed aglow, making it visible from the ocean, from the lake, from Palm Beach proper. The interior of the tower is a study in vertical space. From the ground floor, the tower appears as simply another element of the house's complex geometry. But from Marjorie's second-floor sitting room, that private staircase begins spiraling upward. The staircase itself is an architectural achievement. Its cantilevered each stone tread answered into the tower wall, but appearing to float, creating a sense of lightness, despite the massive stone construction. The stair spiral clock, wise ascending in agile curve that allows comfortable climbing even in formal attire. The walls along the staircase feature those hand-painted Portuguese tiles we mentioned earlier, depicting pastoral scenes, creating visual interest during the ascent. Small windows punctuate the ascent at regular intervals, providing glimpses outward, creating anticipation for the views that await at the summit. And then you emerge into Marjorie's sanctuary. The tower room is octagonal, 8 equal sides, creating a space that has no obvious front or back, no hierarchy. High views because every direction offers something worth seeing. Each wall features a floor-to-ceiling window, custom-made glass and iron frames. The windows operable, allowing air circulation, allowing Marjorie to control the environment. To the east, the Atlantic Ocean. From 75 feet up, the ocean reveals its true scale, its true power. The curvature of the earth becomes visible. The horizon seems impossibly distant. On clear days, you can see ships passing miles offshore. The color of the water changes throughout the day. Dawn brings soft pinks and gold. Midday creates brilliant blues, afternoon light adds depth and complexity, sunset transforms the ocean into liquid metal. Marjorie would watch storms approach from this vantage point, seeing the weather systems form on the distant horizon, watching them move toward shore. The drama of Florida, thunderstorms unfolding like the Ader to the west Lake Worth. The lake offers a completely different aesthetic, calmer, more intimate, more contained. The lake's shoreline reveals the geography of Palm Beach, the properties lining both shores, the boats traversing the water, the bridges connecting the island to the mainland. Beyond the lake, the Florida mainland stretches away into distance. On clear days, you can see for 20 or 30 miles, the land gradually fading into atmospheric haze. To the north and south, the coastline. From this elevation, the true shape of Palm Beach becomes apparent. The way the barrier's land curves, the way properties are arranged, the relationship between ocean and lake. You can see other estates, the Kennedys, the Paws, the various industrial and financial titans who made Palm Beach their winter home, but none of their house have towers. None of their estates can claim this particular view. Marjorie understood that the tower wasn't just about seeing, it was about being seen. The tower announced Mar-a-Lago's presence to everyone who looked up, to passing ships, to their estate owners, to anyone on the beach or the lake. The tower said, "I am here and I cannot be ignored." Now, before we continue, I want to hear from you. We've walked through these gardens, these terraces, these recreations. As sand up into that extraordinary tower, what strikes you most about Marjorie's approach to landscape and outdoors? Drop your thoughts in the comments and make sure you're subscribed, because the story is about to take some unexpected turns. Marjorie Merriweather Post lived at Mar-a-Lago for over 40 years, from its completion in 1927 until her death in 1973. These weren't status years. Mar-a-Lago evolved with her as her circumstances changed, as her marriages ended and began again, as her business interests expanded, as her philanthropic activities deepened. Her marriage to Edward Hutton ended in divorce in 1935. She married Joseph Davies in 1936. Davies was a diplomat who would serve as ambassador to the Soviet Union. This marriage brought international figures to Mar-a-Lago. Soviet officials, American politicians, people navigating the complex geopolitics of the pre-war and war years. Mar-a-Lago became more than a social venue, it became a formal diplomatic space. That marriage ended in 1955. She married once more Herbert May, but this marriage was brief, ending in divorce in 1964. Through all these personal changes, Mar-a-Lago remained constant, remained her home, her refuge, her statement. As she aged, Marjorie's entertaining became somewhat less frequent, but no less lavish. She began to think seriously about legacy, about what would happen to Mar-a-Lago after she was gone. Nadinia Hutton, who became the actress Dina Merrill, Adelaide Post and Eleanor Post, each with their own families, their own interests, their own lives. None of them wanted Mar-a-Lago them. Maintenance costs were staggering even for a family with post-fortune resources. The property required constant attention, constant investment, and the social landscape was changing. By the 1960s and early 1970s, the kind of formal entertaining that Mar-a-Lago was designed for was becoming less common. The Gilded Age was truly over. The estates that had a find that raw were being demolished or converted to other uses. The Vanderbilt houses in New York had mostly been torn down. The great Newport cottages were becoming museums. The idea of maintaining enormous private estates was becoming unsustainable, both financially and culturally. Marjorie understood this. She understood that Mar-a-Lago's survival required something beyond private ownership. So she began contemplating an extraordinary gift. In 1972, as Marjorie approached her mid-80s, she made her decision final. Mar-a-Lago would be bequeathed to the United States government. It would become a winter White House, a retreat where presidents could escape. Washington could host foreign dignitaries, could conduct informal diplomacy in surroundings that rivaled anything European capitals could offer. The vision was compelling. Camp David served as a presidential retreat, but it was rusted, hidden away in the Maryland mountains. Mar-a-Lago could offer something different, sophisticated, tropical, accessible to international visitors arriving by air or sea. The estate could host stated dinners in that magnificent ballroom. Foreign leaders could be housed in the numerous guest bedrooms. Negotiations could occur intimate spaces away from the formality and publicity of Washington. Marjorie's vision was that Mar-a-Lago would become to winter what the White House was to the rest of the year, a symbol of American prestige and power. She was extraordinarily generous in structuring this gift. She left the estate itself valued approximately $20 million in early 1970s valuations. She left an additional endowment, several $1 million, intended to help with maintenance costs. She left detailed instructions about how the estate should be maintained, how the garden should be cared for. Rothy antiques and artwork should be preserved. When Marjorie died in September 1973, the government accepted the bequest. President Nixon's administration took possession of Mar-a-Lago, and almost immediately problems emerged. The Secret Service evaluated Mar-a-Lago for presidential use and identified numerous security concerns. The property was accessible from multiple directions: Ocean Lake public roads. The surrounding area was densely developed, providing numerous vantage points for potential threats. The house itself, with its numerous windows, its connection to outdoor spaces, was difficult to secure. Making Mar-a-Lago truly secure would require extensive modifications that would potentially compromise the architectural integrity that made the estate special. Then there were the practical issues. The maintenance costs were indeed staggering, far more than Marjorie's endowment could cover. The estate required full-time staff, dozens of people, to maintain the grounds, the house, the mechanical systems. The antique materials required specialized care: tile, restoration, roof maintenance, stonework, cleaning, all requiring craftsmen with specific expertise. The government discovered that maintaining Mar-a-Lago would cost more annually than the endowment generated. President Nixon used Mar-a-Lago briefly, stayed there for short periods during the final months before his resignation. President Ford never visited the estate. President Carter showed no interest whatsoever. By the late 1970s, the government was actively looking for ways to divest itself of Mar-a-Lago. The property was becoming an embarrassment, sitting largely unused, deteriorating slowly, the gardens becoming overgrown. In 1980, the government officially returned Mar-a-Lago to the Marjorie Merriweather Post Foundation. The foundation found itself in an impossible position. They had a spectacular property that none could afford to maintain. They attempted to donate it to various institutions. Universities were approached but declined. Museums considered it but couldn't manage the costs. The state of Florida was approached but refused, and so Mar-a-Lago sat empty. At the early 1980s, the fountains were shut off. The gardens were minimally maintained. Their rooms slowly deteriorated in Florida's humidity. It seemed entirely possible that this masterpiece would be demolished. In 1985, Donald Trump purchased Mar-a-Lago for approximately $8 million. He purchased the furnishings for an additional $3 million, $11 million total for an estate that cost over $140 million in inflation-adjusted dollars to build. It was objectively one of the great real estate acquisitions of the 20th century. Trump's initial plan was to use Mar-a-Lago as a private residence, as Marjorie had intended, and for the first decade headed. But the maintenance costs that had defeated the government, that had overwhelmed the Post Foundation, affected Trump as well. Even for someone with substantial resources, Mar-a-Lago was financially challenging. The property taxes alone were substantial. The insurance was extraordinary. The maintenance staff required year-round employment. The mechanical systems, the roofs, the stonework, the landscape, all required constant investment. By the mid-1990s, Trump was looking for solutions, and he found one that was simultaneously controversial and brilliant. He would convert Mar-a-Lago into a private club. The club model would generate revenue, membership fees, annual dues, event charges, all creating income streams that could support the property's maintenance. Trump filed the necessary applications with Palm Beach authorities. Their action was immediate and negative. Palm Beach's old guard was horrified. The idea of Mar-a-Lago becoming a club seemed like desecration. These were families who had known Marjorie personally, who had attended parties at Mar-a-Lago as private guests, who felt ownership over the estate's legacy. They fought the club application vigorously, but Trump had arguments on his side. Without the club model, Mar-a-Lago would likely be sold again, and the next buyer might subdivide the property, might demolish the house, might destroy everything Marjorie had created. The club model guaranteed preservation, guaranteed that the architecture would be maintained, guaranteed public access, albeit limited and expensive. After extensive negotiations, the town approved the club applica. Tie-in with conditions: the membership would be limited, the number of events would be restricted, parking, traffic, noise, all had to be managed. In 1995, the Mar-a-Lago Club officially opened. The initiation fee was $100,000. Annual dues were several thousand. The club would eventually grow to about 500 members, though Trump had initially proposed limiting it to 200. The transformation required surprisingly few physical changes. The ballroom remained intact, becoming an event space. The dining areas continued. The original function guest bedrooms became available for member use. The grounds remained impeccably maintained. Trump added a few elements. A larger, more modern pool complex supplemented Marjorie's original pool. Additional cabanas and recreational facilities were constructed. But the core of Mar-a-Lago, Marjorie's vision, her architectural achievement, remained essentially unchanged. Mar-a-Lago story took another dramatic turn in 2016, when Donald Trump was elected President of the United States. Mar-a-Lago effectively became Marjorie had originally envisioned a winter White House, but in a form she never could have imagined. Instead of being owned by the government and used by various presidents, Mar-a-Lago remained private property used by its owner, who happened to be president. This created unprecedented situations. The estate became a regular venue for presidential business. Foreign leaders were hosted here. National security discussions occurred in the dining room. Policy decisions were made on the terrace. The media dubbed it the Winter White House. Trump spent numerous weekends at Mar-a-Lago during his presidency, treating it as an alternative to the White House itself. This usage created controversy. Questions about security. How could classified discussions occur in a private club where members and their guests were present? Questions about ethics. Was the president benefiting financially from hosting government functions at his own property? Questions about precedent. Was this creating a new model for how presidents could operate? But regardless of these controversies, Mar-a-Lago achieved something remarkable. It became globally recognized. People around the world who had never heard of the estate suddenly knew its name. News coverages showed the architecture, the grounds, the interiors to audiences of millions. In a strange way, Trump's presidency fulfilled Marjorie's vision. Mar-a-Lago became significant in American governance, became a place where history was made, became internationally recognized as a seat of American power. Just not in the way anyone had expected. After Trump's presidency ended in 2021, Mar-a-Lago remained its primary residence, and it remained in the news. FBI searches in 2022 related to classified documents, ongoing investigations and legal proceedings, continued political activity as Trump remained a central figure in American politics. Mar-a-Lago had become permanently embedded in American political consciousness. So what is Mar-a-Lago today? It's simultaneously many things. It's a private club functioning as Marjorie might have intended, hosting elaborate events, gatherings of wealthy individuals, social occasions. It's a residence, true. MP maintains personal quarters, lives there when not traveling. It's a political headquarters where Republican politics are discussed and shaped, where candidates seek and/or cements where strategy is formulated. It's a historical landmark that represents the Gilded Age's final flowering, and it's an architectural treasure that continues to inspire awe. The preservation challenges remain significant. Those antique Spanish tiles need constant care. The Portuguese azulejos require specialized restoration when damaged. The stonework needs periodic cleaning and repair. The roof a particular challenge, because those antique tiles are irreplaceable. If one breaks, it must be replaced with modern reproductions carefully matched to the originals. Mechanical systems, plumbing, electrical, HVAC all require ongoing updating, balancing modern needs with historical preservation. The grounds require constant attention. The tropical vegetation grows aggressively. The salt air corrodes metal, the sun fades colors, but Trump has maintained the property impeccably. Whatever controversies surround Mar-a-Lago, Sijanoon questions the quality of its maintenance. The gardens remain spectacular. The interiors are preserved. The architecture is protected. In this sense, the club model has succeeded. It has provided the financial resources necessary to maintain a property that defeated government ownership, that overwhelmed a family foundation, that challenged Devon's substantial private wealth. The question going forward is what happens next. Trump is now in his late 70s. What becomes of Mar-a-Lago after his ownership ends? Will it remain a club? Will it finally become a museum? Will it return to private residential use? The answer matters because Mar-a-Lago is irreplaceable. It represents a moment in American history when we believed we could build anything, when craftsmanship mattered more than cost, when beauty was worth pursuing for its own sake, when creating something permanent, creating legacy was valued. Walking through Mar-a-Lago today, you feel the weight of that history. You see evidence of Marjorie's vision in every tile, every carving, every carefully considered proportion. You sense the care that you went into creating this place. And you understand that we don't build like this anymore. Not because we lack the technology. Quite the opposite, we have better technology than the 1920s craftsmen had. We don't build like this because we lack the commitment. Because we can't imagine spending 7 years on a single project. Because we won't invest the resources necessary to source materials globally, to employ craftsmen for years, to accept no compromises in pursuit of perfection. Mar-a-Lago stands as both inspiration and reproach. Inspiration in what its houses possible. Reproach in reminding us how far we've fallen from those standards. Marjorie Merriweather Post died 50 years ago. But their vision endures in Portuguese hills that still gleam, in Spanish ceilings that still soar, in that tower that still reaches toward the sky, in gardens that still inspire, in spaces that still take your breath away. She set out to prove that American architecture could rival anything Europe had produced. She succeeded. Mar-a-Lago isn't a copy of European estates. It's better. It takes the best of multiple traditions. Spanish proportions, Moorish, each decoration, Italian materials, Portuguese craftsmanship, and synthesizes them into something uniquely American, bold, ambitious, uncompromising. That's the American character reflected in architecture. And that's Marjorie's legacy. Not the wealth she inherited thought that was substantial. Not the business empire she managed thought that was significant. But this palace on the Florida coast, this testament to what's possible. This reminder that we once built things meant to last centuries. Mar-a-Lago will outlive all of us. It will outlive the RSIs. It will outlive the changing political fortunes. It will outlive the various owners and occupants, because great architecture transcends the moment. It speaks to something permanent in human nature. Our desire for beauty, our need for space that inspire, our drive to create things that outlast us. So here's my final question, and I really want to hear your thoughts on this. What responsibility do we have to preserve places like Mar-a-Lago? Should architectural masterpieces remain private property, or should they eventually transition to public ownership? Should places this significant be accessible to everyone, or is exclusivity acceptable? When it enables preservation, drop your thoughts in the comments. And thank you for taking this journey through Mar-a-Lago with me. If you love architectural history, if you're fascinated by the Gilded Age, if you want to understand how the great American estates came to be and what they mean, subscribe, because we're going to continue exploring the greatest houses America has ever produced, the stories behind them, the people who built them, and what they tell us about who we. Reinvention might become again.